I've always really appreciated the Beatitudes because of the values that are upheld within that scripture reading for today. And, the values that, are a part of the world in which we live are a little bit different from the values that are pointed out here today by St. Matthew in his gospel. And, success, achievement, wealth, all kinds of other things that I can't think of right now, really point to success for people in the world. And just so you know, the gospel here isn't saying that there's anything wrong with achieving, being successful, earning money. None of those are bad. But what it's saying is, what Jesus is saying in this gospel is really the foundational piece of what each of us is called to be about. It's a foundational piece, that's for sure. So I did a little bit of background because sometimes even I struggle with, just exactly what does that mean. So I started with, and I looked this up, and you can look this up, blessed are the poor in spirit. It's, what this author said, it's recognizing your own spiritual need and dependence on God. So being poor in spirit means recognizing your own spiritual need and your dependence on God, and your inability to save yourself. You need Jesus, you need his grace. That's the only way any of us are going to be saved. So we're all dependent on God's grace, that's for sure. And there's that song that some of you were here for sure, we're dependent on God's grace. And that's just, I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I think grace is much more available and prevalent than we really appreciate and recognize. But that's my own opinion. And then another one, blessed are they who mourn. I think that's pretty obvious to all of us that, suffering the loss of someone that we really care about and love. There's not a person probably in this church that's old enough to remember that doesn't appreciate what a really difficult thing that is to accept the loss of a loved one. I learned it when I was like in 5th grade when my dad passed away suddenly. I didn't even know. I never thought about the fact until that happened that people actually passed away. It just wasn't part of my world, wasn't a part of my experience. But certainly that did lead to some grieving, especially for my mom, because she was stuck with me and my brother, and couldn't have been a great joy. I mean, we were all right. We weren't bad kids, but it had to be kind of scary to her to do that. So that first one is, being poor in spirit is just remember, it's recognizing our dependence on God and our dependence on God's grace, and our inability to save ourselves. He's the only one that can save us. We can only be saved by cooperating with that. The next one that I would comment on is the meek. And I don't know if I ever really looked at this before, but the meek are those this is what one author said. The meek are those who are humble, those who are gentle, those who are patient and submissive. The humble are those who are gentle, patient, submissive, and submissive to God. So, and it was another comment in there that the author made that said, you just gotta, when you're angry or upset about something or someone, you gotta let God handle the injustice. Let God handle the injustice. Sooner or later, I think God does take care of injustice and God will handle it. So, so blessed are those who mourn. We did that. Blessed are the meek. That's who we are here. We're called to be the meek. Those who are humble, gentle, and patient, and submissive to God. For they will be satisfied. Blessed are the pure of heart, the clean of heart, if you will. We all know what that's about. Blessed are the peacemakers. Something to think about. When do we have opportunities in our life, school, the workplace, home, when do we have opportunities to actually be peacemakers, to bring peace to a situation that's kind of out of control, sure. And blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. There are a lot of people right now in our world who are being persecuted for what they believe in, okay? It happens in so many countries, it's hard to get your arms around it. I have a whole list, and you can do this too if you choose, but I have a whole list of countries that I pray for every night that really are being persecuted for no good reason at all, except for the fact that they're Christian, okay? Or there's some other religion that people don't like or don't want anything to do with. I mean, there's lots of historic hatred that goes on, that goes way back, to earlier times when people are still upset about and can't let go of it. So, it's just, I pray for those people who suffer, and there are a lot of them who do, believe me. So, and you can name them as well as I can, that's for sure. And blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely. Rejoice and be glad. We don't get a whole lot of that. That doesn't, at least in my experience, we don't have a lot of people persecuting us or insulting us. Sometimes maybe once in a while you'll run into that, but not very often. But, it certainly calls us to pray for those people that do suffer from insult and persecution for sure. So I would just encourage you to take a little bit of time today and just reflect on these scripture readings. You can Google them on your phone. I'm sure you all have phones. If you don't, that's okay. But if we can Google those things and you can find them in your phone, and then you can just kind of scroll down through them, and it's like a recommitment, I think. I commit myself to be the Beatitudes, or I commit myself not to be maybe, but to live the Beatitudes and to be faithful, because they're just a real inspiration to me, and it's kind of a reminder to me of how I should be and how I should live and what should be important to me, and to keep my values straight. So I would just encourage you to do that. So I'm done.